Have you ever thought about the thin line between a statistic and a story? The casualty reports just say 1 killed, 2 wounded. They're just numbers. I was supposed to be one of those numbers at the end of July 1944. My name is Frank Keegan, Private First Class, and I was supposed to die on that bridge. We'd already clawed our way deep into France. The beaches of Normandy were behind us, but in their place, we got the bocage, that labyrinth of hedgerows that turned the war into an endless game of cat and mouse with death. Every day was the same. Up before dawn, cold sea rations, a march through sucking mud, and a short, brutal firefight for another crossroads or farmhouse. We were tired. Tired down to the bone. We weren't the same eager kids who'd landed in June. We'd aged 10 years in just a few weeks. Our next objective was a town called Saint-Laurent. But to get there, we had to cross a river the locals called the Rivière Noire, the Black River. And there was only one way to do it. Take an old stone bridge that looked like it was 300 years old. The Germans, of course, knew this perfectly well. They'd turned the far bank into a fortress. We realized it the second we cleared the last line of trees. The bridge was beautiful, the kind you see on a postcard, arched, built of gray moss-covered stone. But right now, that beauty was sinister. On the far side of the bridge, there was an unnatural silence. No movement. No smoke from a cook fire. Nothing. Quiet as a tomb, Corporal Hendricks muttered beside me. He had no idea how right he was. Lieutenant Wallace spread a map on the hood of a jeep. The plan was simple, like all brilliant plans that lead you straight to your grave. The first platoon, our platoon, was to charge across the bridge under the cover of machine gun fire. As soon as we established a foothold, the rest of the company and the Shermans would follow. Simple as that, right? We waited for the signal. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. I checked my Garand, adjusted the ammo pouches and 2 grenades on my belt. Every man was doing the same, lost in his own little ritual before facing the unknown. Then the lieutenant waved his arm. Go! For the first few seconds, everything went according to plan. Our machine guns hammered the far bank, keeping the Germans' heads down. We burst from cover, the sound of our boots on the stone bridge deafening. We covered 10 yards, then 20. I could already see the other side, see the sandbags piled up at the entrance. We're gonna make it, the thought flashed through my mind. And in that instant, the world split in 2. I didn't know what it was at first. The sound wasn't like a gunshot. It was a crack and a roar all at once, a sound that hit you right in the chest. To my left, where Hendricks was running, the stone parapet of the bridge erupted in a fountain of splinters. It was an 88mm gun. The legendary 88, the curse of every American GI. They'd let us get in close for a clean shot. The bridge turned into hell, the air filled with the shriek of shrapnel and screams. I saw guys go down, cut down by an invisible scythe. We hit the deck, pressing ourselves against the low stone wall that barely covered our heads. "Suppressive fire!" the lieutenant yelled, but his voice was lost in the thunder. I raised my rifle and started firing toward the gun's suspected position. Just to make myself do something, to keep the panic from taking over. Someone next to me cried out, and then fell silent. I didn't dare to look. Retreat was impossible. The bridge was a killing floor. The only way was forward. But how? And that's when the accident happened. I don't know if it was a second shell or a mortar round. All I remember is a blinding flash, somewhere very close. Not a single piece of shrapnel touched me, but the blast wave, It was like being hit by a giant's fist. It lifted me off my feet and threw me with incredible force against the stone parapet. I remember a crack, but I couldn't tell if it was my ribs or the stones breaking. My head slammed hard against the rough granite. My helmet flew off and clattered away, tumbling down into the dark water below. The last thing I saw was the gray, indifferent sky of France. And then, darkness. Not the silence between shots, but a total black void. I shouldn't have survived. I was supposed to die on that bridge. But an accident saved me. Or maybe it damned me. I didn't know yet. Coming back was slow, agonizing. It felt like I was swimming up from under a great depth of dark, thick water. First came the sound, a dull, monotonous ringing in my ears, like a church bell tolling from very far away. Then came the pain, a dull, throbbing ache in the back of my head and a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest with every breath. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they were weighted down with lead. I forced them. The world appeared as a blurry, dancing collection of light and shadow. I was lying on something cold and hard. Stone. The smell of dust, ozone, and something metallic tickled my nostrils. I was alive. That simple thought cut through the fog in my head with the clarity of a lightning strike. I'm alive, but where am I? I moved carefully. My body answered with a groan of protest, but it obeyed. I was on my side, half buried in stone dust and chunks of rubble. My rifle was nearby, clutched to my chest as if I'd been hugging it in my sleep. I slowly sat up and the world began to come into focus. I was on the bridge, but not on its surface. The explosion, the one that should have killed me, had blown a hole in the stone roadway, a ragged wound the size of a tabletop, and I was lying in that hole in a shallow crater, hidden from view on all sides by broken chunks of stone. The blast wave hadn't thrown me into the river or out into the open. It had neatly, almost gently, placed me in this makeshift grave, which had in turn saved my life. An accident, a ridiculous, absurd, life-saving accident. A silence hung over the bridge, not the deafening silence of a lull in battle, but the silence of death. A few yards away lay the bodies of 2 guys from my platoon. They were still, twisted in unnatural poses, now a permanent part of this ancient stone bridge. I looked away. I couldn't look at them. I glanced back toward our side of the river. There, beyond the trees, I knew the rest of my platoon was waiting. They weren't firing. They were just waiting. They must have seen us get wiped off the bridge and were now too scared to raise their heads. They thought we were all dead, and to them, I was just as dead as the others. And the other side? I risked a look, very carefully, millimeter by millimeter, from behind a chunk of stone. The German side was calm. I saw the sandbags, saw the MG-42 machine gun nest camouflaged at the very entrance to the bridge. 2 soldiers in helmets sat beside it, smoking, talking quietly. They were confident, secure. They controlled the bridge. They were waiting for our next attack so they could turn it into another slaughter. Somewhere farther back behind them had to be that 88, the cause of this whole disaster. It was the key to everything. As long as it wasn't destroyed, any assault on the bridge was suicide. But where was it? I couldn't see it from my hideout. I heard a shell whistle overhead, our artillery firing blind from concealed positions, trying to find that damned gun. The shell exploded in a grove of trees, far from the target. The Germans at the machine gun didn't even flinch. Two feelings were at war inside me. The first, the strongest and most natural, was fear. Its icy fingers gripped my guts and whispered, "Lie still, Frank. Don't move. You're alive, and that's all that matters. Wait for nightfall. Maybe under the cover of darkness you can crawl off this damned bridge and get back to your guys." It was the voice of self-preservation. It was logical and reasonable. But there was a second feeling. It was quieter but more insistent. It was the voice of duty. The voice of Corporal Hendricks lying a few feet away. The voice of those guys waiting on the other bank, hoping for a miracle. I was their eyes. I was the only one here in no man's land who could see anything. If I just lay here until night, how many more of our guys would die in the next attempt to take this bridge? I told the fear to shut up. I was a soldier. I had a job to do. I started to move. My canteen had been punctured by shrapnel, but there was a little water left. I wet my dry lips. I checked my rifle. It was fine. The action wasn't jammed. I had enough ammo. The 2 grenades on my belt were still there. I wasn't helpless. But attacking a machine gun nest alone was insane. I needed information. I needed to find that 88mm gun. My cover was good, but my view was limited. I had to change my position. About 10 yards away, closer to the German side, the bridge was cluttered with the bodies of 2 dead mules and the wreckage of a cart they'd been pulling. They were probably the first casualties of the shelling. That wreckage offered better cover and a different vantage point. But those 10 yards were open ground. If the Germans spotted me, I looked at the machine gunners. They'd finished their cigarettes and were now lazily scanning our side of the river. They weren't looking at the bridge. They were certain there wasn't a living soul on it. This was my chance. I waited until I heard another one of our shells whistle overhead. The moment it exploded in the distance, creating a momentary distraction, I moved. I didn't run. I crawled, slithering on my belly, pushing my rifle ahead of me, hugging the cold stones. Those 10 yards felt like a marathon. Every muscle screamed with tension. I felt like the pounding of my heart was audible on the far bank. But they didn't see me. I slipped into the shadow of the overturned cart, into that chaos of wood, leather, and death. I froze, trying to catch my breath. The view from here was completely different. I could see past the machine gun nest. There, about 50 yards from the river, was a small grove of trees. And I saw it. It was brilliantly camouflaged. The Germans hadn't dug a gun pit. They had simply rolled it into a half-demolished stone barn, of which only 3 walls remained. The 4th wall was gone, and in that opening, the long predatory barrel of an 88mm anti-aircraft gun, repurposed for direct fire, was pointing out. Tree branches and a camouflage net almost completely hid it from view. It was impossible to spot from our side of the river. But from my angle, from the side, it was visible. I saw the 4-man crew, saw the crates of shells. I'd found it. I'd found the main threat. The joy of discovery was immediately replaced by despair. What was I supposed to do with this information? I could try to shoot the crew with my rifle, but at this distance, with my head throbbing from a concussion, I'd be lucky to wound one of them before they turned my cover to dust. Yell to my guys? Useless, they wouldn't hear me. I was trapped. I had information that could save dozens of lives, but I couldn't pass it on. And in that moment, looking at that damned barn, at those calm, confident artillerymen, an idea was born. A crazy, suicidal, but only possible idea. If I couldn't tell my guys where the target was, maybe I could show them? The idea, born of desperation, was terrifyingly simple. The artillerymen on our side were firing blind because they had no spotter, no point of reference. I had to become that point of reference. I had to light a signal fire they couldn't possibly miss, and the only fuel for that fire was my own life. The plan wasn't just crazy. It was a guaranteed suicide mission. But as I looked at the bodies of my comrades on the bridge, and then to the bank where my friends were waiting helplessly, I knew I had no choice. It was better to burn out in a bright flash that gave others a chance than to fade away quietly in this stone trap, taking my secret to the grave with me. My first target wasn't the cannon. It was too far away. My target was the MG-42 machine gun nest at the entrance to the bridge. It was only 20 yards away. It was the key. If I could take it out, I would create a commotion right in front of the 88's position, a disturbance so obvious that even a blind spotter on our side would know where to aim. It would be my firework display, my last salute. I began to prepare. I unhooked both grenades from my belt. I checked the pins. They pulled easily. I placed them on the ground in front of me. Then I took my rifle, checked the round in the chamber, and laid it where I could grab it in an instant. Every breath I took was slow and deep. I forced my racing heart to calm down. Panic now was the same as death. What I needed was cold, ringing fury and absolute precision. I looked at the machine gunners again. They were still relaxed. One of them even yawned. They weren't expecting an attack from the bridge. From their perspective, the bridge was a giant stone cemetery. I waited. Just like before, I waited for the sound of one of our shells. It would give me a few seconds of auditory cover. And there it was, the distant thump of our howitzer, followed by a rising whistle. The moment the shell screamed overhead, I moved. I burst from behind the cart like a coiled spring. Not crawling. There was no time. 3 fast, low steps, then a dive onto the stones. I had cut the distance in half. The Germans hadn't seen me. Their attention was diverted for a second by the explosion somewhere behind them. I froze again, becoming part of the stone. My heart was hammering. 10 more yards. The longest 10 yards of my life. I pulled the pin on the first grenade, holding the spoon down tight. I waited again for the whistle of a shell, and then another dash. This time they saw me. I saw one of them turn his head, his eyes widening in disbelief. He shouted something, raising his rifle, but it was too late. I let the spoon fly and, without standing, lobbed the grenade in a low arc. It hit the sandbags and dropped right into their nest. I didn't watch. I rolled away, pressing myself into the stones, and immediately pulled the pin on the second grenade. The first explosion was deafening, a concussion that hammered my ears and made the bridge shudder. I got to one knee and threw the second grenade, not into the nest itself, but behind it, to where I guessed any other soldiers might be taking cover. The second blast followed the first. The screams that had started after the first one were cut short. The machine gun nest went silent. And now came the main event, the culmination of my plan. I could have tried to take cover, to hide, but that would have made it all for nothing. I jumped to my feet, to my full height. In the middle of the bridge, for all to see, I was the perfect target. I raised my Garand and started firing. Not at the machine gun nest. There was no one left to shoot. I was firing toward the half-demolished barn, to where the 88 was hiding. I wasn't trying to hit anyone. I was just sending round after round in that direction. Ping! My rifle ejected the empty clip. I fumbled for a new one from my pouch, my fingers trembling, but I managed. I slammed it home. More firing. Every shot was a signal. Every shot was screaming to my friends on the other side. Look, I'm here. The target is here. Fire here. And the Germans answered. The crew of the 88 finally understood what was happening. I heard a guttural command, saw them begin to swing their massive barrel toward me. A few rifles opened up on me from the trees. Bullets whizzed past. striking sparks from the stone around me. One hit my shoulder, searing like a hot poker. I staggered, but kept my footing. I kept firing. I had become a beacon, and I prayed my guys would see my light. And they did. I heard a new sound in the sky. It wasn't the whistle of a single shell. It was the incomparable, soul-tearing shriek of a full artillery barrage. My guys understood. They understood everything. They unleashed the entire battalion's firepower on that one spot. The last thing I remember is smiling. And then the ground beneath me heaved. A wave of fire washed over me, and the world went black again. I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder and yelling my name. "Keegan! Frank! God damn it, he's alive!" I opened my eyes. Lieutenant Wallace's face was hovering over me. All around were the guys from Charlie Company. I wasn't on the bridge anymore. I was on the grass, on the enemy side of the river. The bridge was behind us. It was ours. Where the barn had been, there was now a smoking crater and burning wreckage. The 88mm gun was gone. The lieutenant told me it was the craziest, most heroic thing he'd ever seen. When they saw me attack the machine gun nest alone, then stand up and start firing, they understood my plan. They relayed the exact coordinates to the artillery. My insane dance with death on the bridge had given them the target. I was sent home after that. Shrapnel from our own shells had torn up my legs, and the bullet in my shoulder was just the cherry on top. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I became one of those numbers, not on the casualty list, but on the list of wounded shipped back to the States. I was supposed to die on that bridge, and, in a way, I did. The kid who was scared and just wanted to survive, he remained on those cold stones. And in his place, someone else was born. Someone who understood that sometimes a single accident, one ridiculous chance, isn't given to you to save your own life, but to give you the opportunity to trade it for something more. And you know what? I have no regrets.